First of all, I love my teeth. They're pretty freaking nice. All right, TMI time. 4 months later, and it gets real. And I'm like, look, honestly, talking about having some dude all up in my mouth just jerking and shit is not what I want to be talking to you about. But adulting is tough from time to time. We have to have these conversations. By the way, did you know that US dental insurance hasn't really changed since about the 1970s? All right, so today I am coming to you from this super awesome, yet mildly creepy cemetery because I thought I'm getting a tooth pulled today in Budapest, Hungary. So I figured, what the hell? I'll shoot in this amazing cemetery to symbolize the death of a loved one, my tooth. So you're probably wondering how the heck I got here, why I flew all the way from the US to get a tooth pulled in Budapest. I didn't do it exactly for that reason, but it's kind of the reason I ended up in Budapest as opposed to another country right now. First of all, I love my teeth. They're pretty freaking nice. So I kind of want to keep most of them. But about 6 months ago, started having some pain in one of my molars, and dentist said, let us know if it gets worse. So I went off on my merry way. Sold my house, drove across the US. 4 months later, I'm in Reno, Nevada, and it gets real. I went from like a 0 on the pain scale to like an 8 on the pain scale in a course of 3 days. And I'm like, at this point in my early travel career, which I'm still in my early travel career, I didn't really know what to do whenever I had kind of a dental emergency and I'm on the road. So rookie move, I ended up just kind of kiboshing the last 3 weeks of that road trip and driving back to Charlotte. Went to the dentist. After my dentist took a look and sent me to the endodontist, and then I paid the endodontist to take a look, is that I have a broken root on one of my molars that had a root canal done about 10 years ago. Problem is, a broken root isn't really something you can fix. You kind of got to get rid of the tooth. So I said, well, how much is this going to cost? And they're like, well, you got to go pay somebody else to ask that question because we don't do that here. So I went to somebody else in Charlotte. They charged me for an initial exam, which was about $130. Of course, my insurance paid for some of that. By the way, did you know that US dental insurance hasn't really changed since about the 1970s? We still get about $1,000 to go towards our dental each year, and that's kind of what it was back in the 70s. Most plans, you get about $1,000 to go towards your dental, and then the rest is all out of pocket. If I remember correctly, the cost of dentistry has increased, I think 600%, but I digress. I need the tooth pulled, and because it's an important tooth, I need an implant put in so that everything else doesn't move around. I got some good teeth, I'm still pretty young, and probably the right thing to do. How much is this gonna be? About $5,000 to $6,000. Mind you, with only $1,000 for dental insurance that's gonna be paid by my insurance, the majority of that's gonna be out of pocket. And getting a dental implant takes 3 different visits over the course of about 8 to 12 months. Bottom line is, I was gonna be out $4,000 to $5,000 out of pocket if I get this done in the US. As somebody who's a bit frugal, that's just not an option for me. So obviously I've been doing the homework over the years. I know that dental tourism is a real thing and that a lot of people in North America go somewhere else to get these things done. So I started looking. I said, okay, well, I know Mexico's a place. I know Costa Rica's a place. I started digging. Well, I was planning on coming over to Europe. I said, well, wait a second, where do Europeans go? Long story longer, I find out that most Europeans fly to Budapest. Budapest actually has more dentists or more dental practices per capita than any other European country. But essentially, they're really fucking good at what they do, and a lot of people migrate here to get their dental work done because you can get it done for anywhere from a quarter to a third, if not better, of the price of Western Europe and the United States and North America. So even though a flight over here might cost a good chunk of money, when you're saving $4,000 to $5,000, or on major surgery, you could be saving $40,000 or $50,000. You start to open your eyes a little bit to the possibilities. So essentially, a quick Google search on the price of dentistry in Budapest will show you the general prices for any procedure. From there, you can start to look at reputable dentists, look at Google reviews, just kind of dig and dig and dig for 2 or 3 hours, and you'll narrow it down to 4 or 5 dentists that are doing a really good job and have great reviews and pretty much have amazing guarantees on the work they're doing. Guarantees like 5 years or lifetime, to where if something happens, they'll actually fly you back here to get it taken care of. So I start making phone calls, start asking questions, find a studio, And by the way, this isn't exactly about where I'm going or exactly what dentist I'm using. This is just opening my mind and your mind to the possibilities, because adulting is fucking expensive. And if you can save a few $1,000s here and there and put it towards something else, it's worth looking at. So essentially, I found a dental studio. This one actually has 2 North American representatives that live in the US and travel back and forth to Budapest. Got on the phone with her and we spoke for about 15 minutes about the possibilities. One of the really interesting things about that conversation was I asked her about the bone grafting that the 3 US dentists said that I was going to need done when this tooth was pulled. And I said, well, they were saying once you pull the tooth, they put some bone grafting material, or it's essentially animal bone material that helps your jaw heal quicker. And I said, these US dentists are saying that this is gonna cost $1,000. This seems like a lot of money, and I'm wondering how they know that that's even gonna be needed before they can be in there. She said, well, actually they can't. She said, we won't do that unless you need it, and they won't know whether you need it until they get in there and see how your jawbone looks. And she said, if you're pretty young and you've never had very many dental issues, that's probably not gonna be an issue. And if it is an issue, we charge wholesale only for what amount of material we use. And she said, usually it's only about $200. So number one, the US dentists were blanket charging me for this thing that may or may not be needed. And number two, I've already had a longer conversation with a representative on the phone than I had in most of the dental studios that I was getting quotes from. All right, so fast forward. I fly here to Budapest. Just getting my tooth pulled consists of 3 appointments. First appointment was yesterday. I showed up, they took a whole scan of my jaw, this big old machine that like spun around my head. Dentist calls me in, says we're gonna need another x-ray, and essentially tells me what I already know. Yes, confirmed, you need that tooth pulled, and here's your options for an implant. So let me write this up, and then we'll have one of the consultants grab you and they'll talk through the plan. Go sit down for another 15 or 20 minutes. Representative calls me in. We talk for 20 minutes about their plan, how it's executed, exactly what happens at all the appointments, exactly what costs are included, when I'm gonna need to come back to Budapest, what happens if there's an issue. And it was the most calm, chill conversation I've ever had in a dental practice. Number one, most of the time in the US, I'm sitting in a chair when they're throwing numbers at me and they're throwing details at me and they say, do you wanna do this or not? This was super chill, super calm, and it was just like, here are your options, here's what we can do. Walk away from this and say, do you wanna do these things? If so, we'll pull the trigger, we'll schedule you for your next appointment, and let's go. It took about 2.5 hours yesterday. The total cost for what I'm going to be getting done here in Budapest, assuming everything goes well, is $1,300 compared to $5,000 to $6,000. Did I mention that a lot of US dental insurances will actually pay for work that is done out of country? Because if they're gonna have to pay for it inside the country, they're gonna pay 4 times as much out of their pocket as well. So if you get this done, check with your dental insurance to see if they'll pay for some of the procedure that you have done in another country. So yeah, my second appointment is in literally 30 minutes from now, right down the road from here. And then there's a third appointment. They actually said if you're still gonna be in Budapest, come back in and we'll just take a look at it to make sure everything's going okay. I'm gonna be here for another 7 days, so obviously gonna take advantage of that. Here's the thing, that first appointment where they took all the x-rays was absolutely free. The x-rays were free, the scans were free, the extra x-rays were free. The only thing that cost me was the coffee and breakfast that I had on the 4th floor while I was waiting for my plan to be presented to me. So that was all free. I could walk away and say, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't feel good about this place. All right, so you're all caught up to speed. The next time you see me, hopefully all is good. I'm gonna go get my tooth yanked. I'll see you on the other side. All right, so literally 2 hours later, it was a 10-minute taxi ride over to the clinic. I literally got there, they called me in. I was in the chair for 35 minutes. Honestly, it was fairly uneventful. Not enjoyable, please don't get me wrong, but fairly uneventful. Got done, left, walked about a quarter mile away from the clinic and realized that I forgot to pay. So I had to go back. They called me on the phone right about the time I was getting back. They're like, where are you? Paid, got on a bus, hopped on a light rail, and I'm back in the same cemetery with one less tooth. It's back here, you can't see it. Look, again, this is not the kind of conversation I want to really be having, but as a grown-ass adult, these are conversations that we are not having, and as a US citizen, we're really undereducated about. I feel like we've become a little bit complacent in just assuming that our healthcare system is the bee's knees and that there's no reason for us to be looking elsewhere and doing our research. All right, TMI time. Plug your ears if you don't want to listen. Essentially, they got me in the chair, told me what they were going to do, numbed me up, poked me with a needle, which fucking hurt. But then everything was numb. They took off my crown, took a look at the root canal just to make sure they confirmed that they did need to go ahead and pull the tooth. He then cut my tooth in half and let me know that he was going to be pulling both roots out. That took a little bit because there was some uncomfortable tugging and wiggling and phlegm and baby noises. But essentially he got the tooth out, cleaned up everything down in there, hacked it, stitched it up, and I was out of the chair in less than 30 minutes. Don't get me wrong, it never felt rushed the entire time. It was very fluid. There were 3 people in the room helping with the surgery and gave me some aspirin to take with me, told me not to drink and not to eat anything for a couple hours, and then to come back in a week to get my stitches out. So all of that cost $170, and that was the actual cost of it here in Budapest. Whereas back in the States, to get an extraction was looking at about $450 to $550. And if you wanted sedated, if you wanted knocked out, you were looking at almost $1,000 on top of that, which generally insurances don't pay for actual knockout sedation. I know some people can't do dentistry without full sedation, and that's a massive expense. So what's next, you might be asking? So the rest of this process is, if I'm truly happy with the way this turned out and I'm happy with the clinic, I will come back in no less than 4 months. By the way, in the States they say 3 months, but here they want you to heal for an extra month. Essentially, I can come back to Budapest in 4 months or more, and they will implant a post. That heals up for no less than 4 months, and then I come back again, and they put a porcelain crown that is essentially a whole tooth. Bob's your uncle, looks like brand new, and that's it. Now you might be wondering, isn't it expensive for you to fly over to Hungary, hang out for a week, get this done, and do that 2 more times for a grand total of 3 trips to Budapest? The answer is no. Look, in Budapest, you can buy a beer for $1.50 US. You can buy a full-blown sit-down dinner for about $8. The hostels I'm staying in, which are really nice, are anywhere from $10 to $15 a night. You can get a good Airbnb for anywhere from $25 on up. And I travel hacked this flight, so I flew from the US to Ireland to Budapest, and then I'm gonna take some trains over to Paris and fly home. But I used points, and this flight only cost me $100 total. So if I travel hack for another 4 months, I'll get another free flight and then another free flight. The cost of the flight's grand total, because you have to pay for taxes, is probably gonna be $300 to $400. Total cost of accommodations, flights, food, and getting all of this stuff done is probably still gonna be under $2,500 for me out of pocket, and that's if my American Dental doesn't pay for anything. If they do pay for part of these procedures, that's even less out of my own pocket. Whereas in the States, this was gonna cost me $5,000, maybe $6,000, depending on what kind of issues they would have or what kind of sedation I chose to use. Did I mention that they picked me up from the airport and they are willing to take me back to the airport the last day of my trip? And oh, by the way, if I stay in one of their partner hotels, which are still hella cheap, they would pay for the last night in their hotel. And this is pretty typical with a lot of the high-end clinics here in Budapest. So look, I guess what I'm getting at is, do some more homework. Don't assume that our US healthcare system, or the FDA, or the EPA, or the... Alright, I digress. Just don't assume that everything that we have in the US is the bee's knees and that you shouldn't be asking questions about other options or going out of the country. If you're in the States, honestly, Mexico, Costa Rica, those are great options. And those flights are gonna run you $200 to $400 if you're not travel hacking them. Accommodations are just as inexpensive there. So you can do a lot of these things much cheaper. And most people that are traveling for dentistry, they're doing work that in the States might cost $5,000 to $50,000. But when you take into reality that they can save 75 to 80% off the top of that, there's a monstrous savings. And the cost of accommodations and food and going to these countries is super minimal at that point. So there you go. Feel free to ask me any questions. I guess I'll be coming back in about 5 months to get the next part of this process done. So subscribe, hop on the email list, follow along, and I'll let you know in a week or so whether I'm like curled up in a ball dying or anything like that. All right, catch you on the flip side. Peace.